Would you disown your child for ignoring a homeless person, even if that person was your own mother? That's the impossible choice one powerful CEO faced, and her decision will shock you. This story isn't just about a wealthy family. It's a raw look at what happens when privilege clashes with familial duty and the heartbreaking consequences that follow. This is a story of a good woman who loved her son very, very much. The woman's name was Margaret Thompson. Her son's name was David. Listen, this isn't just another story you'll scroll past and forget. This is one of those rare tales that hits different, raw, real, and absolutely transformative. The kind that makes you put your phone down and actually think. So get comfortable. Maybe grab a coffee, because once we start this journey together, you won't want to pause. And hey, if this is your first time here, do me a favor. Hit that like button, please subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and stick around. Stories like this deserve to be shared, so if it moves you even a little, let me know. Your engagement means everything. Margaret Thompson sat in her corner office on the 40th floor, looking out at the busy city below. At 55, she was one of the most powerful women in business. Her company made millions every year. She owned 3 houses, drove expensive cars, and wore clothes that cost more than most people made in a month. But today, Margaret's heart felt heavy as stone. On her desk sat a letter from a lawyer. Next to it was a photograph of a young man in a graduation cap and gown, smiling wide. This was her son, David. 28 years old, handsome and smart. He worked at another big company across town and lived in a fancy apartment. Margaret picked up the photo and traced her finger along David's face. She remembered the day it was taken. She had been so proud. David had finished college with top grades. The whole family had celebrated at an expensive restaurant. That was 5 years ago. Things were different now. Margaret's secretary knocked on the door. "Mrs. Thompson, your 3 o'clock meeting is here. Cancel it," Margaret said softly. "Cancel everything today." The secretary looked surprised but nodded. Margaret never canceled meetings. She was known for working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. People called her the Iron Lady of business. But today was different. Today, Margaret had made the hardest decision of her life. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out another photo. This one was old and worn at the edges. It showed a woman with kind eyes and gray hair, wearing a simple blue dress. The woman was smiling, but Margaret could see the tiredness behind her eyes. This was Rose Thompson, Margaret's mother. She was 73 years old, and she was homeless. Margaret closed her eyes and remembered the phone call from 3 days ago. It was from a social worker at the downtown shelter. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Sarah from the Hope Street shelter. Your mother is here with us. She's been on the streets for 2 weeks now. She gave us your number." Margaret's world had stopped spinning. "My mother? How did this happen?" She lost her apartment when the rent went up. She couldn't afford the new amount. She's been staying in different places, but ran out of options. She's safe here with us, but she needs help. Margaret had rushed to the shelter that very day. What she saw broke her heart into a million pieces. Her mother sat on a small cot in a room full of other homeless people. Rose's clothes were dirty. Her hair, once so neat and pretty, was messy and unwashed. She looked smaller than Margaret. Remembered, fragile, like a bird with broken wings. "Mom," Margaret had cried, running to hug her. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" Rose had held her daughter tight. "I didn't want to bother you, dear. I know how busy you are. I thought I could figure it out on my own." Margaret's heart broke even more. Her mother had been too proud to ask for help. "Mom, you're never a burden. Never. Come on, we're getting you out of here right now." That same day, Margaret had taken her mother to the best hotel in the city. She bought her new clothes, took her to the doctor, and made sure she had everything she needed. Rose was safe now, staying in a beautiful suite with room service and soft beds. But the damage was done. Margaret couldn't stop thinking about those 2 weeks her mother had spent on the streets. 2 weeks of sleeping in doorways. 2 weeks of not knowing where her next meal would come from. 2 weeks of fear and cold and loneliness. And where had David been during all of this? Margaret picked up her phone and looked at the last text message from her son. It was from 2 months ago. Just a few words. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry I can't make dinner. Big work project." She had tried calling David after she found her mother at the shelter. She left 3 messages. He never called back. Finally, she had driven to his apartment. When David answered the door, he looked annoyed. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "It's about Grandma Rose," Margaret had said. "She's been homeless, living on the streets." David had shrugged. "That's sad, but what does it have to do with me? You're rich, Mom. You can help her." Margaret stared at her son. "What does it have to do with you?" "David, she's your grandmother. She raised me when I had nothing. She worked 2 jobs to help pay for your college. Mom, I barely know her. I see her maybe twice a year. And honestly, I'm busy with my own life. I can't be responsible for every family member who has problems." Those words hit Margaret like a punch to the stomach. She looked around David's expensive apartment. She saw his new television, his fancy furniture, his designer clothes hanging in the closet. "David, your grandmother is family. She's blood. When I was building my company, she watched you after school. She made you cookies and helped you with homework. Don't you remember?" David sighed like he was bored. "Mom, that was a long time ago. I appreciate what she did, but I can't live in the past. I have my own future to think about." "Your future? What about your heart? Your grandmother needed help, and you couldn't even visit her. Look, Mom, you're emotional right now. I get it. But let's be realistic. Grandma Rose made her choices. Maybe she should have saved more money. Maybe she should have planned better. It's not my job to fix her mistakes." Margaret had left that day feeling like she didn't know her son at all. The boy she had raised, the one who used to hug Rose tight and call her the best grandma in the world, was gone. In his place was a stranger. Someone who cared more about money and success than love and family. Now, back in her office, Margaret opened the lawyer's letter again. She had made her decision. It was the hardest thing she had ever done in her life. Harder than building her company. Harder than working 18-hour days. Harder than any business deal. The letter was simple and clear. Margaret was changing her will. David would not inherit her fortune. Not $1, not one house, not one share of her company. Instead, everything would go to charities that helped homeless people and elderly folks who needed care. Margaret knew this would shock everyone. People would talk. The newspapers would write stories. Her friends would ask questions, but she didn't care. She thought about her mother, now safe in that hotel room, finally able to sleep without fear. Rose had spent 2 weeks wondering if anyone cared about her. 2 weeks, feeling forgotten and alone. David would learn the truth soon enough. Margaret's lawyer would call him tomorrow with the news, but there was something David didn't know yet. Something that would change everything. Margaret smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was determined, strong. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Channel 7 News. This is Margaret Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries. I have a story for you. A story about family and what really matters in life." As she waited for the reporter to answer, Margaret looked at both photos on her desk. Her mother, kind and humble. Her son, handsome but cold. Tomorrow, the whole world would know about David's choice. Tomorrow, everyone would hear about how the son of one of the richest women in the country turned his back on his homeless grandmother. And tomorrow, David would learn that every choice has a price. But tonight, Margaret would have dinner with her mother. They would sit together in that hotel room, and Rose would tell stories about the old days. Stories about love and sacrifice. Stories about what family really means. Margaret put the photos back in her desk drawer. She grabbed her coat and purse. It was time to go home. Time to be with the one person who had always loved her, no matter what. The one person who deserved everything she could give, her mother. And just because your son has not treated you like this does not mean you shouldn't be careful. The next morning, David Thompson was drinking his expensive coffee and reading emails when his phone rang. The name on the screen made him frown. Mom's lawyer. David Thompson speaking. He answered, still typing on his laptop. Mr. Thompson, this is Robert Hayes, your mother's attorney. I need to speak with you about some important changes to your mother's will. David stopped typing. Changes? What kind of changes? I think it's best if you come to my office this morning. Can you be here by 10? Something in the lawyer's voice made David's stomach feel tight. Is my mother okay? Did something happen to her? Your mother is fine, but we need to discuss her legal decisions. It's quite urgent. David looked at his watch. He had 3 important meetings today. Can't you just tell me over the phone? No, sir. This requires a face-to-face conversation. 2 hours later, David sat in the lawyer's office, his face white as paper. He stared at the legal papers in front of him like they were written in a foreign language. You're telling me? She's giving away everything? All of it? Robert Hayes nodded sadly. Your mother has removed you completely from her will. Her entire estate, the houses, the company shares, the bank accounts. Everything will go to homeless shelters and charities for elderly people. David's hands shook as he picked up the papers. But I'm her only child. This has to be illegal. You can't just throw away family like this. It's completely legal, David. Your mother is of sound mind. She can leave her money to whoever she chooses. How much are we talking about? David's voice was barely a whisper. Approximately $250 million. David felt like someone had punched him in the chest. $250 million. Gone. Just like that. Why? He asked. Why would she do this to me? The lawyer leaned forward. David, your mother loves you. But she's heartbroken by your treatment of your grandmother. She feels you've lost your way. My grandmother, this is all about that old woman. Robert Hayes looked shocked. That old woman is your family, David. She's the reason your mother became successful. And when she needed help the most, you turned your back on her. David stood up quickly, knocking over his chair. This is crazy. My mother has lost her mind. I'm going to fight this. I'll hire the best lawyers in the country. You can try, Robert said calmly. But your mother made sure this will is rock solid. And David, there's something else you should know. What now? Your mother called Channel 7 News yesterday. The story will air tonight at 6 o'clock. David's face went from white to green. The news? She called the news? The whole city will know about this by tomorrow morning. Your mother wants people to understand why she made this choice. David stumbled out of the lawyer's office like a man in a bad dream. As he walked to his car, his phone started ringing. First one call, then another, then another. David, it's Jennifer from Channel 5. We heard about your mother's story. Can we get a comment? Mr. Thompson, this is the City Herald. We'd like to ask you some questions about your grandmother. David, Channel 12 here. Is it true you refuse to help your homeless grandmother? By noon, David's phone had 50 missed calls. By 2 o'clock, there were reporters outside his office building. By 4 o'clock, his boss called him into a meeting. "David, we need to talk," his boss said, closing the door. "This news story about your family, it's not good for our company image." "Sir, this is all a misunderstanding. My mother is emotional right now. She's not thinking clearly." His boss shook his head. "David, I've known you for 5 years. You're a good worker. But this story makes you look heartless. Our clients don't want to work with someone who abandons their family. Are you firing me? I'm giving you 2 weeks off. Paid leave. Let this news story blow over, then we'll see." David drove home in a daze. When he got to his apartment building, more reporters were waiting. "Mr. Thompson, how do you feel about losing $250 million? David, do you regret ignoring your grandmother? Is it true she was sleeping on the streets while you lived in luxury?" David pushed through the crowd and ran to the elevator. In his apartment, he turned on the television and waited for 6 o'clock. Meanwhile, across the city, Margaret sat with her mother in the hotel restaurant. Rose was wearing a new dress Margaret had bought her. Her hair was clean and styled. She looked like the grandmother David remembered from his childhood. "Margaret, dear," Rose said softly, "are you sure about this news interview?" Margaret reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Rose's eyes filled with tears. "I keep thinking about those nights on the street. I was so scared, Margaret. I didn't know what would happen to me." Margaret squeezed her mother's hand tighter. "You never have to be scared again, I promise. But David, he's your son. I don't want this to destroy your family." Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mom, let me tell you a story. Do you remember when I was 12 and Dad left us?" Rose nodded sadly. "Those were hard times. You worked at the diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. You were so tired, but you never complained. And do you remember what you told me? What did I say, dear? You said, Margaret, family isn't just about blood. Family is about showing up when people need you. Family is about love in action, not just love in words." Rose smiled through her tears. "I remember now. David has forgotten that lesson, Mom. Maybe losing his inheritance will help him remember." At exactly 6 o'clock, the news story began. Margaret and Rose watched from their hotel room. David watched from his apartment. Thousands of people across the city watched too. The reporter, a kind-looking woman named Susan Chen, spoke directly to the camera. "Good evening. Tonight, we bring you an extraordinary story about family, wealth, and what happens when love turns to disappointment." Margaret Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries and one of our city's most successful businesswomen, has made a shocking decision. She has completely removed her son from her will, choosing instead to donate her entire fortune to charity. The reason? Margaret's 73-year-old mother, Rose Thompson, spent 2 weeks living on the streets after losing her apartment. During this time, Margaret's son David allegedly refused to help his grandmother, showing what his mother calls complete indifference to her suffering. Susan Chen continued, "We spoke with Margaret Thompson earlier today. Here's what she told us." The camera switched to Margaret, sitting in the hotel room with Rose beside her. "My mother raised me to believe that family comes first," Margaret said, her voice strong but sad. "She worked 2 jobs to help me through school. She watched my son when he was little. She never asked for anything in return." The reporter asked, "This is a decision worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you have any regrets?" Margaret looked at her mother, then back at the camera. "My only regret is that it took me this long to realize that my son had lost his heart." Money can't buy compassion. Success means nothing if you forget where you came from. Rose spoke next, her voice shaky but clear. I don't want people to be angry at David. He's a good boy who got lost along the way. Sometimes people need a wake-up call to remember what's important. The news story continued for 10 more minutes. It showed pictures of Rose from her younger days, working hard to support Margaret. It showed Margaret's rise to success, always crediting her mother's support. And it showed David's expensive lifestyle, contrasted with his grandmother's recent homelessness. By the time the story ended, social media was exploding. Grandma Rose was trending on Twitter. Facebook was full of people sharing the story. Some people supported Margaret's decision, others thought she was too harsh. But everyone was talking about it, in his apartment. David turned off the television and sat in the dark. For the first time in years, he thought about his childhood. He remembered his grandmother's cookies. He remembered her reading him bedtime stories. He remembered how she always had a hug when he was sad. When had he stopped caring? When had money become more important than love? His phone buzzed with a text message from his mother. David, it's not too late to change. But change has to come from your heart, not from losing money. I love you, but I can't respect the man you've become. The choice is yours. David stared at the message for a long time. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, his grandmother was finally safe and warm. And somewhere out there, his mother was probably crying, wishing things could be different. For the first time in years, David cried too. 3 days after the news story aired, David couldn't leave his apartment. Every time he stepped outside, people recognized him. Some pointed and whispered. Others came right up to him with angry words. You're that man who abandoned his grandmother. A woman shouted at him in the grocery store. You should be ashamed. An older man at the coffee shop shook his head sadly. David's voicemail was full of messages. Some were from reporters, still trying to get his side of the story. Others were from old friends who had seen the news. David, it's Mike from college. Dude, what happened to you? I remember you talking about your grandma all the time. You used to say she was your hero. David, this is Sarah from high school. I can't believe this story is about you. You were always so kind back then. What changed? But the message that hurt the most came from his ex-girlfriend, Jenny. They had dated for 2 years before breaking up 6 months ago. David, I saw the news story. Now I understand why we didn't work out. You became someone I didn't recognize. Someone cold. I hope you can find your way back to the person you used to be. David played that message 3 times. Jenny was right. He had changed. But when? And why? He walked to his bathroom mirror and stared at himself. When he was little, people always said he looked just like his mother. Same dark eyes, same stubborn chin. But his grandmother Rose always said he had her smile. You've got my smile, little David, she would say, tickling him until he giggled. A smile that can light up the whole world. When was the last time he had really smiled? Not the fake smile he used at work meetings, but a real one. A smile that came from his heart. David couldn't remember. That afternoon, his mother called. David stared at the phone for a long time before answering. Hello, Mom. David. Margaret's voice was tired. How are you holding up? I've been better. I can't go anywhere without people staring at me. I'm sorry about that. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to wake you up. David sat down heavily on his couch. Mom, I've been thinking about when I was little, about Grandma Rose. Margaret's voice softened. What have you been thinking about? I remember when I was 8 and I broke my arm falling off my bike. You were at an important business meeting, but Grandma Rose sat with me in the hospital all night. She held my hand and sang old songs until I fell asleep. She loves you, David. She never stopped loving you. And I remember when I was in high school, and Tommy Jenkins was bullying me. Grandma Rose marched right up to that boy's house and talked to his mother. The bullying stopped the next day. Margaret started to cry softly. She's always been a fighter, always protected the people she loves. When did I stop seeing her as a person, Mom? When did she become just an old lady I had to visit twice a year? I think it happens slowly, son. Success can change people if they're not careful. Money can make hearts grow cold if we let it. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Where is she now? Is she still at the hotel?" "Yes, she's safe and comfortable." "But David, she asks about you every day. She's worried about you. She's worried about me. After everything?" That's what grandmothers do, sweetheart. They love us, even when we don't deserve it. After the phone call, David couldn't stop thinking about his grandmother. He pulled out his laptop and started looking at old photos on social media. There she was at his high school graduation, beaming with pride. There she was at his college graduation, tears of joy in her eyes. There she was at his first job celebration, telling everyone how smart and wonderful her grandson was. In every photo, Rose looked at David like he was the most important person in the world. And in every recent photo David could find of himself, he looked empty. Successful, but empty. Rich, but alone. That evening, David made a decision. He grabbed his car keys and drove across the city to the Hope Street shelter where his grandmother had stayed. He didn't know why he needed to go there, but something was pulling him. The shelter was a simple building with worn paint and old windows. But it was clean and warm. A kind-looking woman at the front desk smiled at him. "Can I help you?" My grandmother stayed here a few weeks ago. Rose Thompson. I just wanted to see, to understand." The woman's face changed. "You're David, aren't you?" David nodded, feeling ashamed. "I'm Sarah, the social worker who called your mother. Your grandmother talked about you every day she was here." "She did?" "Oh, yes. She showed everyone your photo. She bragged about how successful you were, how proud she was of you. Even when she was scared and cold, she worried about you working too hard." David's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. Why wasn't she angry at me? Why didn't she hate me for not helping her?" Sarah smiled sadly. "Because that's not who Rose Thompson is. She's the kind of person who sees the good in everyone, even when they can't see it in themselves. Can I see where she slept?" Sarah led David to the main room. It was full of cots and lockers. The room was clean but crowded. David tried to imagine his grandmother here, surrounded by strangers, scared and alone. She slept right there. Sarah pointed to a cot near the window. She said she liked to look at the stars and remember better times. David walked over to the cot. It was just a thin mattress on a metal frame. Next to it was a small shelf where people could keep their few belongings. What did she have with her when she came here? Just a small suitcase and her purse. But, David, you should know something else. What? Your grandmother gave away most of her dinner every night. She said there were people here who needed it more than she did. Even when she was homeless, she was taking care of others. David sat down on the cot where his grandmother had slept. He put his head in his hands and cried. Really cried. For the first time since he was a child. "I'm a terrible person," he whispered. Sarah sat down next to him. "No, you're not. You're just a person who got lost. But lost people can find their way home if they really want to. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to become the person I used to be." "Start small," Sarah said. Start with one phone call, one visit, one act of love. When David got home that night, he sat at his kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not an email or a text, but a real letter on paper. It took him 3 hours to write 2 pages. Dear Grandma Rose, I don't know if you'll want to read this. I forgot who I was. I forgot where I came from. I forgot that everything I have, everything I've accomplished, started with your love and sacrifice. I remember when I was little, you used to make me chocolate chip cookies every Sunday. You would let me help mix the batter, even though I made a mess. You said the cookies tasted better with love in them. I remember how you taught me to ride my first bike. You ran alongside me for hours, holding the seat, never letting me fall. When I finally rode on my own, you cheered louder than anyone. I remember how you came to every school play, every baseball game, every award ceremony. You sat in the front row and clapped until your hands hurt. Somewhere along the way, I stopped remembering these things. I stopped seeing you as the woman who raised me. I saw you as an obligation, a duty, something to check off my list. I was wrong, so wrong. You were never an obligation. You were my foundation. You were my heart. And when you needed me most, I wasn't there for you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know saying sorry doesn't erase the nights you spent on the street, wondering if anyone cared about you. But I want you to know that I do care. I've always cared, even when I acted like I didn't. I want to find my way back to being your grandson, the little boy who thought you were the most wonderful person in the world, because you are. I love you, Grandma Rose. I'm sorry it took losing everything to remember how to say it. Your grandson, David. The next morning, David drove to the hotel where his grandmother was staying. His hands shook as he knocked on her door. When Rose opened the door, she looked smaller than he remembered. Older, more fragile. But her eyes were still kind, still full of love. David, she whispered. Aye, Grandma. David's voice cracked. I wrote you a letter. And I brought something. He held up a box of homemade chocolate chip cookies from the bakery downtown. Rose started to cry. She opened her arms, and David fell into them like he was 8 years old again. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry. Oh, my sweet boy, Rose whispered, holding him tight. You're here now. That's all that matters. You're here now. They sat together in her hotel room, eating cookies and talking. For the first time in years, David really listened. He heard about his grandmother's fears during those cold nights on the street. He heard about her worries for his future. He heard about her unconditional love that never wavered, even when his did. David, Rose said, taking his hand, I want you to know something. Even when I was scared and alone, I was proud of you. You're my grandson. Nothing can change that. But Grandma, I failed you. I let you down. Rose smiled and touched his cheek. Honey, we all lose our way sometimes. What matters is finding our way back home. And family. Family is home. That afternoon, Margaret came to visit her mother. When she saw David sitting there, holding Rose's hand, she stopped in the doorway. The 3 generations of Thompson women and men looked at each other. 3 people who had hurt each other, disappointed each other, but still loved each other. Mom, David said, standing up. I want to earn your respect back. I want to earn Grandma's trust back. I don't care about the money. I care about being your son again. David said. Margaret walked over and hugged them both. That's all I ever wanted to hear you say. Outside the hotel window, the sun was setting over the city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The news stories would continue. People would still have opinions about their family drama. But tonight, 3 generations sat together, eating chocolate chip cookies and remembering what family really means. It was a start, a small start, but a real one. And sometimes, that's all you need to begin finding your way back home. 6 months later, the city looked different to David Thompson. Not because anything had changed on the outside, but because everything had changed on the inside. Every Sunday morning, David woke up early and drove to his grandmother's new apartment. Margaret had found Rose a beautiful place near the park, with big windows and a garden view, but the best part wasn't the fancy furniture or the modern kitchen. The best part was the smell of chocolate chip cookies that always greeted David at the door. "Good morning, my sweet boy," Rose would say, just like she did when he was little. "I made your favorites." They had developed a routine over these months. David would arrive at 9 o'clock sharp. They would eat breakfast together, while Rose told him stories about the old days. Then they would take a walk in the park, feeding the ducks and talking about everything and nothing. But today was different. Today was special. "Grandma," David said, sitting down at her kitchen table, "I have some news to share with you and Mom." Rose's eyes lit up. At 73, she moved a little slower than before, but her mind was sharp as ever. "Good news, I hope?" "I think so," David smiled. It was that real smile Rose always talked about. The one that could light up the world. Margaret arrived a few minutes later, carrying groceries and flowers. Over the past months, she had gotten into the habit of cooking Sunday dinner for the 3 of them. It reminded her of when David was young, before success and money had complicated everything. "So," Margaret said, putting the flowers in a vase, "David says he has news." David took a deep breath. "I've been working with Sarah from the Hope Street shelter." "You remember Sarah, Grandma?" Rose nodded. Sarah had become like family to all of them over these months. "Well," David continued, "I've been volunteering there 3 nights a week, helping serve dinner, talking to people, just being useful." Margaret smiled. She had noticed how different David looked lately. Less tired, less empty, more like the son she remembered. "And last week," David said, his voice getting excited, "Sarah asked me to help with something bigger. The shelter needs a new building. The old one is falling apart, and they have twice as many people needing help as they have beds." Rose clapped her hands together. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. How can we help?" "That's my news. I've been working with architects and construction people. I want to build them a new shelter, a big one, with proper rooms for families, a medical clinic, job training programs, everything." Margaret felt tears in her eyes. "David, that's incredible. But buildings like that cost millions of dollars." David grinned. "I know. I've been thinking about that for months. I can't build it with my salary from the company." He paused, looking at both women he loved most in the world. "So I have a proposal for both of you." Margaret and Rose leaned forward, curious. "Mom, I want you to change your will back. Give me my inheritance." Margaret's face fell. For a moment, she looked disappointed. Had David learned nothing? Was he still thinking only about money? But David held up his hand. "Wait, let me finish. I want you to give me half of my inheritance, so I can give it all away. Every single dollar. I want to use it to build the new shelter. I want to create programs for homeless elderly people. I want to make sure no grandmother ever has to spend a night on the streets, wondering if anyone cares about her." The room went completely quiet. Rose put her hand over her heart. Margaret stared at her son like she was seeing him for the first time. "I want to call it the Rose Thompson Center for Hope," David continued. "Because, Grandma, you taught me what hope looks like, even when you had nothing. Even when you were scared and alone, you never stopped hoping. You never stopped believing in love. Rose started crying, happy tears that rolled down her cheeks like raindrops. "And Mom," David said, turning to Margaret, "I want you to be on the board of directors. Help me run it. Make sure we're doing it right. Make sure we never forget why we're doing it." Margaret couldn't speak. She just nodded and cried. "There's one more thing," David said softly. "I want to quit my job at the company. I want to run the center full-time. I want to spend my life helping people instead of just making money." Rose reached across the table and took David's hands in hers. They were older hands now, with wrinkles and brown spots, but they were still the strongest hands David had ever known. "My sweet boy," she whispered, "you've found your way home." Over the next few months, the story of David's transformation became news again. But this time, it was a different kind of story. David Thompson, the man who made headlines for losing his inheritance after ignoring his homeless grandmother, has announced plans to donate his entire fortune to charity, reported Susan Chen on Channel 7 News. The same people who had criticized David before now cheered him on. Jenny, his ex-girlfriend, sent him a card that simply said, "This is the David I fell in love with. I'm proud of you." But the best response came from the people at the Hope Street shelter. "David shows up every week," said Sarah, the social worker. "Rain or shine, happy or sad, he's here. The people staying with us have adopted him like family. They call him Cookie David because he always brings homemade cookies from his grandmother." The old David would have been embarrassed by a nickname like that. The new David wore it like a badge of honor. 1 year after the news story that changed everything, the Rose Thompson Center for Hope held its grand opening. It was a beautiful building with warm colors and comfortable furniture. But more than that, it was a place where people felt valued and loved. Margaret, David, and Rose stood together, cutting the ribbon. "This center represents more than just a building," Margaret said into the microphone. "It represents what happens when we choose love over money, family over success, and hope over despair." David took the microphone next. 18 months ago, I was a very different person. I thought success meant how much money I had in the bank. I thought family was something to fit into my schedule when convenient." He looked at his grandmother, who was beaming with pride. "But the people I love most taught me a different lesson. They taught me that success is measured by how many people you help. Family isn't convenient, it's essential. And love isn't something you do when you have time. Love is something you make time for." And Rose stepped up to the microphone. Her voice was soft, but everyone listened carefully. "I spent 14 nights on the street, not knowing where I belonged," she said. "But I learned something important. Home isn't a place with fancy furniture or expensive things. Home is where people know your story and love you anyway." She looked at David and Margaret. "My grandson got lost for a while, but he found his way back home. And now, this beautiful center will help other people find their way home too." That evening, the 3 generations of Thompsons sat in Rose's apartment, eating cookies and looking at photos from the day. "David," Rose said quietly, "do you ever regret giving away all that money?" David thought about it for a moment. A year ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. Money meant security. Money meant power. Money meant success. "You know what, Grandma? I'm richer now than I ever was before." "How so, dear?" David looked around the room, at his mother, who respected him again, at his grandmother, who had always loved him, at the photos on the wall showing him working at the shelter, surrounded by people who had become like family. "Because now I have something money can't buy. I have a purpose. I have people who count on me, not because of what I own, but because of who I am." He picked up one of Rose's cookies and took a bite. And I have the best chocolate chip cookies in the world, made by the strongest woman I know. Rose laughed, the same laugh David remembered from his childhood. Musical and warm and full of joy, you always were a charmer, my sweet boy. Margaret watched her son and her mother together and felt something she hadn't felt in years: complete happiness. Her family was whole again. Different than before. Maybe. They had all been hurt and they had all grown, but they were whole. Outside Rose's window, the city sparkled with evening lights. Somewhere in that city, the Rose Thompson Center for Hope was getting ready to welcome its first families. People who were scared and tired and wondering if anyone cared about them. Tomorrow, they would discover that someone did care. A whole community cared. A grandmother who had been homeless herself cared. A CEO who chose love over profit cared. And a young man who had lost his way and found it again cared. They would discover that home isn't about having the most expensive things. Home is about having people who show up when you need them. People who love you when you're at your worst and celebrate with you when you're at your best. As David hugged his grandmother goodbye that night, Rose whispered something in his ear. I always knew you'd come back to us, sweetheart. Love always finds a way home. David held her a little tighter. I love you, Grandma Rose. Thank you for never giving up on me. Never, my sweet boy. Never. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered most, David Thompson was the richest man in the world. Not because of what he owned, but because of what he had learned. Family first. Love always. Some lessons are worth losing a fortune to learn, and some fortunes are worth much more than money. 5 years later, the Rose Thompson Center for Hope has helped over 3,000 people find housing and rebuild their lives. David Thompson still works there every day and has never regretted his choice. He married Sarah, the social worker, and they have a baby daughter named Hope Rose Thompson. Margaret Thompson stepped down as CEO to spend more time with family and charity work. She says it was the best business decision she ever made. Rose Thompson, now 78, volunteers at the center twice a week, teaching people how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies. She says the secret ingredient is still love. The Thompson family has Sunday dinner together every week. They never miss it. Because they finally understand what matters most. This story reminds us that success without compassion is empty, wealth without generosity is meaningless, and family is the greatest treasure we can ever possess. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what we truly have. Dear viewers, what an incredible journey we've shared together. The Thompson family story shows us that it's never too late to change, never too late to choose love over money, and never too late to come home to the people who matter most. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Please give this video a thumbs up if David's transformation inspired you, or if you believe in the power of second chances. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between success and family? What would you have done in David's situation? Do you have a grandmother or family member who showed you unconditional love like Rose did? What's the most valuable lesson your family taught you? We read every single comment and love connecting with you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our heartwarming stories about love, family, and finding your way back to what truly matters. Here's something special I want you to do. After watching this story, reach out to someone in your family you haven't talked to in a while. Send a text, make a phone call, or better yet, visit them. Tell them you love them. Life is short, and the people who love us unconditionally deserve to know how much they mean to us. Your homework this week: make time for family. Put down your phone during dinner. Listen to your grandparents' stories. Hug your parents a little longer, because at the end of the day, love is the only inheritance that truly matters. What story should we tell next? Let us know in the comments what kind of heartwarming family stories you'd like to hear more of. Thank you for being part of our community. Your support means everything, and together, We're spreading more love and kindness in this world. Remember, family first, love always. And it's never too late to come home. See you in the next story at Virtuous Stories. We love you.